I want to transition to this story and to this football game. The Indianapolis Colts and the Buffalo Bills squared off yesterday at Orchard Park in Buffalo, New York. And the Colts obviously were one of the slowest teams out of the gates. They had the most difficult opening 5 games of the season for any NFL team in the year. So we knew they'd come out slowly. They started off 1-4. They've now won 5 of their last 6 games. They're above 500 for the first time all year. Now, stop me if I've said this before. I'm a big believer in the Indianapolis Colts. If you've been listening to me for the last 2 years, you will know how bullish I've consistently been on the Indianapolis Colts. And it's all because of the arrival of one individual. One man changed my perception, changed my whole outlook on the Indianapolis Colts. And that's Jonathan Taylor. Now, obviously, I'm a huge Wisconsin homer. And so I have a huge vested interest in the Indianapolis Colts, and I root for them because of Jonathan Taylor. But I was objective and have said this repeatedly since the Indianapolis Colts drafted Jonathan Taylor 2 years ago. I said when they drafted him, this was fully an objective perspective based purely on the talent that I knew Jonathan Taylor had as a running back. The Indianapolis Colts are drafting the next elite running back in the NFL. For some context, I went to Wisconsin. And when I was a junior, Jonathan Taylor was a freshman, and that's when he burst onto the scene. In fact, his very first game of the year as a true freshman, we were playing against Utah State. He was a backup at the time to a guy named Bradrick Shaw. And as a backup, he had 94 rushing yards and a touchdown as a backup. And Paul Chris said in the second game of the year, okay, young buck, yeah, you're going to be the starting running back. His first game as a starting running back at the collegiate level for the University of Wisconsin. We're playing Florida Atlantic at home. He rushes for 223 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that's when I knew, this kid is special. This is going to be the next Ron Dane at Wisconsin. And this is a guy who, in his freshman year at Wisconsin, 3 times rushed for over 200 rushing yards. 3 times he rushed for 200 or more yards in a game. His sophomore year, he rushed 4 times for 200-plus rushing yards in a game, along with one 300-plus rushing yard game in a triple overtime win against Purdue. His junior year, he rushed for over 200 yards 4 times. And even now, there's this new kid, Braylon Allen, who's a freshman at Wisconsin that just rushed for 228 yards and 3 touchdowns against Nebraska. So Wisconsin's running backs are starting to consistently produce now, especially at a young freshman year age. And you look at his production all 3 years at Wisconsin. His first year at Wisconsin, 1,997 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns. His second year, nearly 2,200 rushing yards with 16 touchdowns. His junior year, over 2,000 rushing yards again with 21 touchdowns, and he was a Heisman finalist. And honestly, I argued he should have garnered more consideration for the Heisman Trophy that year. But needless to say, you could see just how talented this kid was. He was a track star in high school. So he has the speed. He's got the training. He's got the footwork. He's got the size. And when you look at yesterday's win over the Buffalo Bills, it was 1,000% because of Jonathan Taylor. And he's the reason why this team is going to accomplish anything. If they can accomplish anything this year, it's going to be because of him. Because his running, along with the offensive line, they exerted their will on the Buffalo Bills. They said, we're not going to play any mind games, any trickery, no smoke and mirrors. We are going to run it down your throat, and can you stop us? And yesterday, the answer was no. They rushed Jonathan Taylor 32 times. It was a career high, 185 yards, 4 touchdowns. The Colts as a team ran the ball 46 times yesterday against the Buffalo Bills. They only passed it 20 times. 46 rushes to just 20 passes yesterday. So The writing was on the wall. We are going to run this up the gut until you can stop us. And the entire afternoon or the entire morning, whenever it was that they played, Buffalo Bills could not stop the run. The Colts ate up nearly 38 minutes of time of possession. Bills just had 22. And again, they were riding the backs of really riding the back of Jonathan Taylor, but also that offensive line. And that was the big difference because they just simply bullied them. Their leading receiver was their tight end, Jack Doyle, who had 3 catches for 30 yards, just to put something into perspective. And so I've said this before, and I'll say this again. The Colts have the recipe and the personnel to be a Super Bowl caliber team. But it all comes down to one thing. And it's not Jonathan Taylor. We know what we're going to get from Jonathan Taylor. We know how consistent of a stallion he is. We know what we're going to get from T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman Jr. We know what we're going to get from the offensive line, how they're going to manhandle a defensive line. The defense is elite. We know what we're going to get from those other parts of the team. The biggest question is, how will Carson Wentz play? Now, to be honest, I thought that the Colts were better than the Bills last year in the divisional round when they lost 27-24 last year. And that was with Phillip Rivers, who I thought wasn't talented enough. Now, to be honest, I'm not fully convinced either that Carson Wentz is talented enough, but he made some big-time throws yesterday. He executed when he needed to, and he wasn't a hindrance to the team. And that was the most important point. So as long as he can continue to deliver timely throws, combined with the productivity of Jonathan Taylor on the ground, well, the sky's the limit for this team. They have everything else you would want. They have the culture. They've got the head coach, elite defense, elite offensive line play, consistent, productive running game. Perhaps they could have a slightly more A-lister type of wide receiver, but not every team is perfect. This is about as perfect of a construction of a team as you can get. So they still have a brutal schedule left. That's the only problem, is the Colts have had like the most difficult schedule of the season. They still have the Bucs and the Patriots at home. They travel to the Arizona Cardinals. So there's still a gauntlet with about 5 or so games left in the season. And so I'm not positive they'll make the playoffs. I hope that they can. I'll put it this way. If they are able to get into the playoffs, they are going to be a nightmare of a matchup, because to me, they're very similar to the Tennessee Titans, except the difference is they've got more elite offensive line play and their defense is better than the Titans. At least the personnel are overall better. So I was impressed with the Indianapolis Colts yesterday to tack on 41 points to the number 1 defense in the NFL, and the NFL team that's allowed the fewest points all season. It's incredible. And Jonathan Taylor, I understand. I tweeted this out yesterday. I know that their record doesn't support it, but Jonathan Taylor deserves to be included in the NFL MVP conversation. I'm not saying he's going to win it. I'm not saying he deserves to be the front runner, but the impact that he has to winning for his team, it's Derrick Henry-esque. I mean, those two guys, those are the 2 running backs that should be included in the conversation. Now, obviously, Henry is out of it because of his injury, but what they mean to their organizations, the fact that they are the sole reason and the sole reasons behind their team's success and winning records, should be rewarded. It should be rewarded, and he certainly deserves to be in that NFL MVP conversation. And now he leads the NFL for the most rushing yards, Jonathan Taylor. So just proud of him as a former Badger to do that and having a tremendous, tremendous season. I would love to see the Colts find a way to make the postseason.